bring in Tom Teague now. We're going to talk economics and what's going on with our media. Tom, thanks for joining me, my friend.
How are you?
Oh, dude, I'm busy.
Yeah.
What about you? You look good, man. You're all dressed up. You got somewhere to
go? I decided to be clean today.
You wanted to talk about the media. Tell us what's going on.
So, obviously there's a deal out there. Warner Brothers has two bidders. Netflix is one of them, and Paramount, which is Ellison's son, and Ellison behind it. What they're bidding on two different things. Warner Brothers has obviously their film studios, HBO Max, and that's what Netflix is trying to acquire. And Paramount is trying to acquire the whole panoply, which includes CNN, TMT, Cartoon Network, all this stuff. And so there's a difference in the bids. The bid coming from Paramount, which is the Ellison side, is like $108 billion of cash that's financed through debt and equity. And then the Netflix side obviously will leave those, the CNN, the TMT, all that stuff will be spun off to shareholders, and it'll be a cash and stock deal just for the studios, the HBO, et cetera. But I think behind it, I'm just watching this, it's pretty interesting because there's been a huge negative smear campaign on Oracle. Oracle's too levered. It's CDS had already, this deal was announced like the 5th of December. Oracle CDS, after this deal was announced, have moved from like 117 basis points to 160. They've come back in a little bit today.
For our non-finance types, that's credit default swaps. It's like
credit default
insurance. How expensive is the insurance? Is what they're saying.
Right, correct. Yeah. It's kind of like a spread that where it would trade in a normal market, and basically, in my opinion, what's happening is there's a huge battle for the heart and soul of media in this country, and it started, I think, with Elon Musk and Twitter. And that's been a huge changer in terms of the narrative and being able to control the narrative. And, what people don't realize, I think, and I've listened to a lot of smart people talk about this. People look at not that many people really watch CNN, but everything that CNN says ends up going in the news cycle and being
it's fed
all the talking heads in the media, no matter how stupid it is. I mean, Laura Ingram's show every night is basically, can you believe that this guy on CNN said this? And they all do that. So it's a relevant piece to the narrative that gets conveyed. And, this week we had obviously it was a tragic way to end one's life. What happened to Rob Reiner, it was awful. But in the aftermath of that, you start seeing that this guy was working with pretty much everyone in the CIA to undermine Trump that he possibly could have. Right.
Yes.
So, that there's definitely a CIA influence in our media, whether it's supposed to be there or not supposed to be there. It's definitely there.
It's definitely there.
Ellison is definitely more of a conservative person. Like it or leave it, I think Barry Weiss is better than what we had before at CBS. And probably, at least you get more towards the balance side, even if you're not really there. And there's something that she's not very balanced on. But I think that these assets that are in play are very important. And it's also important, if you can imagine, what if CNN became a more balanced network, right?
Well, somebody's going to buy them, right? Who's going to buy them?
Well, it would be Paramount. If Paramount wins, they would control, right? And so
let me ask you real quick. Ellison, obviously involved in the TikTok deal. I mean, he funded most of it, or a large chunk of it. And there's a lot of criticism of him he's trying to control that platform. Does the negative, the campaign against him have anything to do with that, do you think?
Well, I think there's certainly people that believe he's becoming too powerful. I would say that a lot of the stuff that's happening with Oracle is probably not very balanced, and it's more of a smear to try and sort of hurt everything that he has, because that's, his baby. And there's just been an enormous amount of negative criticism of Oracle, most of which is unfounded. I mean, they are a fairly levered company, but it's their debt distribution is such that it's not like they're going to go bankrupt anytime soon or go, lose their investment grade status on their debt. But I think a lot of this stuff is just the classic smear of let's hurt this guy so that we keep him away from these assets. And I think generally there's a transformation in mainstream media away from this like completely like progressive left cuckoo Hollywood stuff, which Hollywood became the owner of a lot of these media assets. And I think it's probably a net positive thing. The board of Warner Brothers rejected the offer this week of Paramount, but I think they're trying to get Ellison to pledge more and to not just use his trust to personally sign for it. But I think it's a net positive thing for media if he does acquire these assets, because the way they've been run over the last few years is they're just a complete propaganda arm of the left, and they're not balanced at all.
Yeah, they're just, everybody knows it now. So
yeah, correct. So it's just a real fight. And I don't know how it turns out, but I know that Warner Brothers is trading higher right now than the bid from Netflix. It's trading around $28. And I would say definitely this is good. This is a saga that's going to continue, so that if Warner Brothers does get hit, it's probably something interesting to look at, as long as, it's still in play.
Right. So you're saying if it gets, the price
stock
goes down,
hit, it goes down like $25 or something like that, I would really, start looking at it, because these are very high quality assets.
Definitely. What else? Anything out of the Fed that you see as interesting?
Yeah, well, so we had the CPI this morning, the core and the regular CPI year on year, and the core was supposed to come out. The sort of market consensus was 3%. It came out at 2.6, which was a huge surprise, I think, to the markets. The markets are reacting in a very positive way. Bonds are going up. There's been a lot of chatter on the last few weeks about the Fed. The Fed cut rates. The Fed said, we're still worried about inflation. This kind of does some of that. It kind of, eases some of that fear, I think. I've said this all along. I think there's a big transformation that's going on in the Fed. I think the view is that we're in restrictive range, probably by 125 basis points. It makes it easier for Trump's view and the guys who Trump puts in the Fed's view that we need to be less restrictive. It makes it easier to implement that. And markets are reacting really well to it, and I think, the Fed's, as I've said before, I think the Fed that we currently have under Powell has been one of, not rewarding growth in any way, shape, or form, trying to hamper growth, trying to control cycles. And I think we need to get into more of a neutral position by the Fed and let the economy do what it's doing. And that's the way we're going to get to this golden age that Trump keeps pitching, is we need rates lower. We need the housing market to boom. The interesting thing is like Trump said this in his speech last night. I don't know if you've talked about this, but Housing and Urban Development came out and said that about 60% of the rental demand was coming from foreigners. Well, obviously a lot of that is coming from people who are probably here illegally. Yeah. Right. Or a good part of it. So, that should take some of the pressure off the rental prices and lower those. And those people get deported is what you're saying. Yes. And it frees up rents to people who live in the country and live here legally. The other thing is that there's obviously a housing shortage. High rates and high mortgages does not help to alleviate that shortage, right? It keeps it very tight. Well, if rates go down, you'll see a big building cycle. And I've mentioned this before with some of these home builders. If you have another big building cycle to try and create more supply, those guys are going to do really well. They're very levered to that. And, I think you'll see the prices start coming down for rentals, which helps CPI.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, We can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
I know it's not your bag, baby, but what about the crypto sell-off? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of competing theories on that. I think the crypto sell-off, it has something to do with Japan. Japan is, owns sort of the rate rise and yield expansion. And I think that makes I think there's a lot of people in Japan who invest in both tech and crypto. So I think that's contributed to the weakness of both recently.
Allegedly, there's some big whales out there still selling, liquidated.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There were some big whales that have held Bitcoin for a very long time that have started selling it. The other thing I think that is part of it, there's a lot of talk about options. There's a lot of options trading on some of the ETFs, like the IBIT ETF. That reduces the vol and performance. And I can tell you firsthand, it certainly affects equities. I can see how it can begin to affect Bitcoin. And there's also a lot of other competing assets now with these stable coins for Bitcoin. So, I think we've reached kind of and the market was very, very long. There's a lot of levered longs in Bitcoin that have gotten, that are buying on margin and have had margin calls. So all of those things I think have hurt the performance recently.
Let me ask you, are you familiar with the whole XRP Ripple narrative story? Do you know much about that?
A bit. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert in any way.
I mean, Rob Cunningham comes on all the time and talks about how it's the new economy and everything, is going to be tokenized and the rails are already built. And, this is the revolution in finance. And I'm just wondering if you have.
Look, I know, for example, that, with the stable coins in general, I think that, there's been a lot of talk about backing them with U.S. Treasuries.
Yes.
And that's already going on. But, if you took, all the euro dollars, for example, that are floating around and you back those with treasuries, that's a meaningful amount of treasury bills that get bought and go away from supply that back these things and continuously get rolled. So, I think that is going to be, I do think that, this sort of vehicle will, I don't know if people will be forced into like a cashless society and all this stuff, but I think going forward, it's in the interest of the Treasury to try and, move some of these people to stable coins that are backed by Treasury bills, because it sucks up some of the supply and would, net be good for the U.S.
One more question. I know you're a Besant fan, and I don't know enough, so I trust you. But a lot of still stuff coming out about him pushing Musk out, and maybe he's still working for Soros and all. Have you heard anything?
I don't think he's still working for Soros. I think, look, my opinion is I think there's a bigger game being played here. I think that my view is that Besant is not happy. Trump is not happy. Musk is not happy with the way Europe's going. I think Europe and that experiment that of the EU is Soros 100%. And the fact that all three of those guys are skeptical of the way that they're moving right now with their, sort of draconian policies, their censorship, arresting people, trying to stamp out any competition from the populists that are winning elections and on the rise. I think, I'm not worried about Besant having another side with Soros at all.
So speaking of Europe, I'm about to put on an article. I was just going through some of the video news coming out this morning. I mean, they are rabidly saying, even if we do get a peace deal, Russia's going to attack and we're going to attack harder. I mean,
I think it's complete insanity, to be honest with you. I don't think any of the civilian populations in Europe have anything close to an appetite to fight in a war with Russia. I think it's one of these, like, when people aren't in war for a long period of time, they forget about how bad it is. and they talk it up and they think there's no risk. I think it's just completely irresponsible to, like in the UK, they're telling people you got to get ready to go fight. And I'm like,
and sacrifice your children of all
it's out of control. And, these countries are they've had such a terrible time with immigration and crime related to that. And, jobs being lost and taxes staying up. And this experiment that the EU's done is completely backfired. So it seems like they're trying to start a war with Russia as a way to like sort of switch the view of what they're doing and try to, sort of cover up their mistakes. And I just think it's incredibly irresponsible and stupid. And I can't imagine that people actually in these countries that are suffering from the policies of their leaders feel like going and fighting for their country right now.
It's like, committing a crime to keep the band together. I mean, it's just, insane.
I haven't really seen anything close to this level of I mean, it's one thing when you're talking about a small country, not when you're talking about the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. It's just irresponsible.
And you got all these beta leaders running around and all these females up in the Baltics. And I mean, screaming, screeching for war. Ursula von der Leyen, I mean, Nazi Incorporated right there.
I mean, all these people, Ruta, I mean, it's amazing because when we had the Cold War, there was a real threat of a war with Russia. And most of the people who were leaders and, driving policy had at least had experience with the Second World War during the Cold War. And they realized how serious it was. And they did not make these ridiculous threats all day long. We didn't want to go there. And it's just amazing to me that these people, it's like their own social media insulting each other and they think there's no consequences at the end. And I like I said, it's just the only way I can describe it is completely irresponsible.
This is the Soros war. The EU's all Soros. The EU's dead. It needs to die. And we need to go back to countries.
And it needs to reform at the very least.
And you look at, they're killing just on the Ukrainian side, our source is 9,000 a week. How in the hell would you want that on steroids with a global war? I mean, it's
a meat grinder. And for what? For an area that is ethnically Russian.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a joke. But I think that Europe has been this whole time thinking that the purpose of this was to have a proxy war to get rid of Vladimir Putin and then take all the resources of Russia like a colony and buy them on the cheap and send them to Europe and have Europe prosper on the backs of the Russian people. And I think, like I've said before, Vladimir Putin, nice guy, not a nice guy, has nothing to do with it. He definitely does not want that to happen to Russia. And this gamble that Europe has made that he would not last has failed
completely.
Miserably.
So now they're going to, they're still doubling down, which is really, really scary. That's why Trump's talking about, well, maybe we'll give them the Article 5 support. I'm like, no, get the hell out. We don't want any tripwire. We don't want any American involvement at all in that whole conflict.
No, I would agree. I think the whole conflict arose because of NATO and the overexpansion of NATO against, verbal commitments that we had made in the past. And, having Kamala Harris go to the Munich Defense Conference and basically say that they were going to join NATO was kind of the last straw.
Yeah, the invasion happened a week later. I was there.
Right.
Yeah, I know it well. Tom, thank you very much, man. And look forward to that podcast. You thought of a name yet?
No, we got to put our heads together on that.
All right, man. Have Merry Christmas. Take care.
Likewise. Merry Christmas.
All right. Ciao.